In the workshop, a look at a 3.5-inch gauge Jinty locomotive chassis that will not run properly. In the village where I live, near York, I have a friend called Dennis, and Dennis is quite a character. He's about 83 or something like that. He has a nice old smart and brown lathe, which lives in his garage right next to the three-wheeler sports car that he made. It's a bit like a Morgan, but it has a V-twin motorcycle engine sat right at the front. Anyway, one day, a few months ago, Dennis turned up at my workshop, and in his car boot were lots of bits and pieces, and one of the bits and pieces was a 3.5-inch gauge Jinty rolling chassis. I featured this chassis and another one in a video a while back, and I mentioned at the time if anyone wanted to make me an offer for either of the chassis, any reasonable offer would be accepted, and I would give the money, of course, to the widow of the man who died. So now, a few months later, no offers were forthcoming, and I still have these parts. And this video features the Jinty chassis. The other one is a 460, I think it's a Black 5, but it's very incomplete. The engineering standard on this chassis is really not that bad, but a lot of the parts are loose. In this clip, using a small screwdriver, I'm tightening the valve rod guide that goes through the frame stretcher. It looks to me like everything's gone wrong on this chassis when it started being put together. Even at this early stage, I could make this thing work, but that would involve complete disassembly, and when it was all back together and running nicely, it's not worth much. And from my point of view, 3.5-inch gauge is a bit small. A lot of the parts in this engine are quite small. They look like parts from a clock, and if I'm perfectly honest, 5-inch gauge is the smallest gauge I can work on. If I can't get my hand inside the smoke box, then there's a bit of a problem, and I know there's no smoke box or boiler on this chassis, but all the other parts are in scale with that. I wouldn't enjoy working on something like this in the first place. I think it's time to put some compressed air into the engine and see what it's actually doing. I don't know what it shows on the original drawing, but for some reason I cannot screw this fitting all the way into the hole. And by looking at the cylinder block, it looks to me like someone started to file away the front of the casting to accommodate a fitting like this. This job was never completed. I screwed in the fitting using some Loctite 542, so it should be okay, and now I've managed to fit the airline. With the air pressure on the compressor set to about 40 pounds per square inch, very little seems to happen, apart from the compressed air blowing straight to exhaust. This is a slide valve engine, and unfortunately the valves are upside down underneath the cylinder, so they do tend to fall off the cylinder. Usually to correct this you have to quickly open the regulator with a good amount of boiler pressure, and this sudden admission of pressure into the steam chest slams the valves against the port face. It's not all bad news. By having the slide valves underneath the cylinder block, it means that when the engine is coasting, the valves will drop off the port, and the engine will automatically coast more smoothly. But unfortunately, this engine is nowhere near that stage. I can already see a couple of problems that give the game away a little bit. The two slide valve rod supports are sticking out and partially unscrewed. This is not a good sign. The unevenness of the studs is not a good sign either, and the badly machined steam chest cover doesn't help. That really doesn't matter, it's right underneath the engine and it's purely a cosmetic thing. Time, I think, to have a look in the steam chest. It was easy to remove all of the nuts apart from the two under the brake beam. And this is what I find inside. A pair of slide valves, one of which tightens up when the wheels are rotated. That probably explains why the valve rod supports are partially screwed out. At first I thought maybe just the valve settings are wrong, but no, it's much more than that. Even though the eccentrics that drive the valves don't look to be far off. Not only is one valve fouling, the other valve is not set in the right position, and doesn't uncover the front part at all. When I remove the valve guide fitting, here you can see how everything is very, very loose. And already I'm breaking out in a cold sweat just thinking about actually how much work there would be to make this thing run. And as this is a 3.5-inch gauge inside cylinder engine, there's not much room to get my fingers into the motion. When I was making the video in the workshop, this made me cringe, but now I'm watching replay as I'm voicing it over. I really am starting to fight the urge to make this work. But no, I have to be disciplined and sensible with this. If you've been following the Simplex series, which is now currently on part 77, and it's not finished, it's still got a way to go, it's been quite enjoyable. It was a challenge, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end. I have a feeling though that with this engine it would be pain and grief all the way. I'm having a look at the moment at the state of the coupling rods. They all feel very loose, and even when the engine is locked solid, the coupling rods are not tightening up. So there's no problem there. I know I'll try more pressure on the compressed air line and see what happens. Not much really. You can see that when I move the reversing lever forward, the engine tries to go backwards, and when I move the reversing lever the other way, then the engine tries to go forwards. Very confusing. Whatever happens, this rolling chassis cannot possibly work. Maybe in another life, if I didn't make a video every day, I would have a go at this. I like tinkering about with things. As this engine has never run, you cannot blame wear for the immense amount of play in the coupling rod bushes. It looks like the quartering is out, which is a very common thing. I'll freeze the video for a moment because I want to show you something else. Have a look at the centre where the axle comes through the wheel. This is the exact opposite of what should be happening. The axle should protrude through the wheel casting very slightly. But as you can see on this wheel, and if you looked at the rest they're the same, the axle doesn't protrude at all. It's too short. As far as I'm aware, this is an LBSC design, and when I used to read LBSC's teachings, which were really good and helped me out immensely, if I remember rightly, LBSC always used to press the axles into the wheels. And when I tried that on the first locomotive I ever made, which was a Simplex, I cracked the wheel. Obviously my interference fit was far too tight. And ever since those days, I've fitted wheels using Loctite 603 and pinned them to the wheels with a grub screw on the inside of the wheel. And none of the wheels that I've ever fitted have fallen off. Here I've got quite a lot of air pressure going into the engine, and as you can see it does try to work, but it doesn't. And I certainly can't blame the coupling rods because I've removed those. To sum up the practicalities of repairing this engine, the 6 wheels need taking off the axles that they're currently on, for the reason that I mentioned, that the axle's too short, and the fact that the quartering isn't right. And that is assuming that the rod lengths are okay. That's a job in itself, and it would take quite a long time. And then there is the problem with the slide valves. That's quite serious and again could take quite a long time to rectify. I haven't removed the slide valves from the steam chest to have a look at them, so they could be wrong as well. I'm sure by now that you should be getting the picture. I'm not having a go at the abilities or the skill of the builder. That's nothing to do with it. It is here and now. I'm just looking at a piece of equipment and trying to figure out the best way to fix it. But I don't think I'm going to go any further with this job. I'm awaiting the arrival of a very interesting job. And at the moment, as I'm still working on the Simplex rebuild, I'm going to put this back on the bench. If anybody wants it, make me a reasonable offer. And that's it. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back, making it unnecessary to comment that the videos are too short.